The gunshot echoed through the empty plains as Katherine Williams pressed her daughter's face against her chest, shielding the infant from the horror that had just unfolded before them. Her husband's body lay motionless on the dusty ground, blood seeping into the parched earth of the Texas frontier. The year was 1875, and Katherine had just become a widow in a land that showed no mercy to those who traveled alone. "Hush now, Eliza," she whispered as the baby's cries grew louder, her tiny face scrunched in discomfort. Katherine's breasts ached with the knowledge they were empty, her milk having dried up days ago as her own body weakened from lack of nourishment. The stagecoach robbery had left her with nothing but the clothes on her back, a wedding ring, and her 3-month-old daughter who now wailed with hunger. Katherine stumbled forward, one foot in front of the other, her dress torn and dirty from the journey. 5 miles back, she had buried her husband with nothing but her bare hands to dig the shallow grave. Now she walked toward what she hoped was the direction of the nearest town, guided only by the setting sun. Night fell quickly on the plains, and with it came the biting cold of a Texas spring evening. Katherine's legs finally gave out beneath her, and she collapsed beneath the spreading branches of a lone oak tree. Eliza's cries had weakened to pitiful whimpers, and Katherine felt tears stream down her face as she rocked her daughter. "I'm sorry, my sweet girl," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart race with fear. Clutching Eliza tighter, she pressed herself against the trunk of the tree, praying the darkness would hide them from whatever danger approached. A tall figure on horseback materialized from the shadows, the silhouette of a wide-brimmed hat unmistakable against the moonlit sky. The rider pulled his horse to a stop not 10 feet from where Katherine hid, and she held her breath as the man dismounted. "Hello," a deep voice called out. "I know someone's there. I heard a baby." Katherine remained silent, but Eliza chose that moment to let out another cry of hunger. The man moved toward the sound, and Katherine saw the glint of a revolver in his hand. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible. "We mean no harm. My baby and we're alone." The man holstered his weapon and approached slowly. As he came closer, the moonlight revealed a weathered face beneath the shadow of his hat, a face lined with experience but somehow still kind. "Madam," he said, crouching down beside her. "What in heaven's name are you doing out here alone?" "Stagecoach robbery," Katherine managed, her throat dry. "They killed my husband. We've been walking since yesterday morning." The man's expression softened as he looked at the whimpering infant in her arms. "Your little one sounds mighty hungry." Katherine couldn't hold back a sob. "Her baby cried for milk she didn't have," she whispered, more to herself than to him. The cowboy was silent for a long moment before he spoke again. "You'll eat before dawn, I promise," he said firmly. "Both of you will." He removed his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders before helping her to her feet. "Name's Jack Lawson," he said as he guided her toward his horse. "Most folks just call me Jack." "Katherine Williams," she replied weakly. "And this is Eliza." With gentle hands, he lifted her onto his horse before climbing up behind her. "There's a ranch about 2 hours' ride from here," he explained. "My ranch. It's not much, but it's warm and there's food." As they rode through the darkness, Katherine felt herself leaning back against the solid warmth of the stranger, who had appeared like a guardian angel in their darkest hour. Eliza had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep against her chest, and Katherine found herself drifting as well, lulled by the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them and the security of the arms that reached around her to hold the reins. "Stay awake, Mrs. Williams," Jack said quietly. "Just a little longer." Katherine forced her eyes open. "Why are you helping us?" There was a pause before he answered. Out here, we help those who need it. Tomorrow might be my turn to need a helping hand. The ranch appeared as a collection of shadowy buildings against the backdrop of the star-filled sky. As they approached, a dog began to bark, and a lantern flickered to life on the porch of the main house. "Jack, that you?" called a voice. "It's me, Charlie," Jack called back. "Got company." "Wake Mary and tell her we need some of that goat's milk warmed up right quick." The man named Charlie disappeared into the house as Jack helped Katherine down from the horse. Her legs buckled beneath her, and he caught her effortlessly, lifting both her and Eliza into his arms. "I've got you," he murmured, and Katherine believed him. The interior of the ranch house was simple but clean, with a fire burning low in the hearth. A woman with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a bun hurried forward, concern etched on her kind face. "Oh, the poor dears," she exclaimed, reaching for the baby. "Charlie said there was a little one. Give her to me, honey. I've got warm milk ready." Katherine hesitated, reluctant to release her child to a stranger. "Mary's raised 5 of her own," Jack said softly. "Your little girl is in good hands." Exhaustion won out, and Katherine allowed Mary to take Eliza, who immediately began to wail again at the separation from her mother. "Sit here by the fire," Jack instructed, guiding Katherine to a rocking chair. "Mary will feed the baby, and Charlie's putting together something for you." Katherine watched as Mary expertly cradled Eliza, feeding her from a cloth-wrapped bottle. The baby's cries ceased almost immediately as she drank hungrily. "Poor little mite," Mary murmured. "She was starving." "I tried," Katherine whispered, her voice breaking. "My milk dried up days ago. We had food in our wagon, but the bandits took everything." Jack knelt beside her chair. "You did what you could, Mrs. Williams. You kept her alive, got her this far." Charlie returned with a bowl of stew and a chunk of bread, which Katherine accepted with trembling hands. The first spoonful nearly made her weep with gratitude. "Slow now," Jack cautioned. "Your stomach needs to remember what food is." As Katherine ate, Jack and Charlie stepped outside, their voices a low murmur on the porch. Mary continued to tend to Eliza, who had fallen into a contented sleep after emptying the bottle. "Your husband?" Mary asked gently. Katherine swallowed hard. "Dead. They shot him when he tried to protect us." Mary's eyes filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, dear. When did it happen?" "Yesterday morning. I buried him myself." The words felt hollow, detached, as though she were speaking of someone else's life. Mary placed a wrinkled hand over Katherine's. "You're safe now. Jack won't let any harm come to you or your little one." "I don't understand," Katherine said. "Why would he take in complete strangers?" Mary smiled sadly. "Jack's got his reasons. He knows what it means to lose someone, to be alone." Before Katherine could ask more, Jack returned to the room. "I've prepared the back bedroom for you and your daughter, Mrs. Williams. You both need rest." Too exhausted to argue, Katherine followed him down a short hallway to a small but comfortable bedroom. Mary followed with Eliza, placing the sleeping infant on the bed and surrounding her with pillows to prevent her from rolling. "Thank you," Katherine whispered. "I don't know how I can ever repay. No need for that kind of talk," Jack interrupted gently. "Get some sleep. We'll figure things out in the morning." As the door closed behind him, Katherine sank onto the bed beside her daughter, overwhelmed by the events of the past 2 days. For the first time since the stagecoach robbery, she allowed herself to truly feel the grief of her husband's death, the terror of being alone on the frontier, and the relief of finding sanctuary when all seemed lost. Her tears came silently, and she wept until sleep finally claimed her, her hand resting protectively on her daughter's tiny chest. Katherine awoke to sunlight streaming through the window and the unfamiliar sensation of a soft bed beneath her. For a moment, Panic seized her as she reached for Eliza, but the baby was not beside her. She bolted upright, heart pounding, only to hear a soft cooing sound from across the room. Mary sat in a rocking chair by the window, Eliza in her arms, bathed in the golden morning light. "Good morning, dear," she said softly. "Your little one's been fed and changed. She's a sweet thing." Relief flooded through Katherine as she pushed back the quilt and swung her legs over the side of the bed. She was still wearing her filthy dress from yesterday, and she felt a pang of embarrassment at her disheveled state. "There's a wash basin on the dresser," Mary said, seeming to read her thoughts, "and I've laid out some clean clothes that might fit you. They belonged to my daughter before she married and moved to Austin." "You're very kind," Katherine said, moving toward the basin and splashing the cool water on her face. It felt heavenly to wash away the dust and tears of the previous days. "Jack's already been up for hours," Mary continued, rocking gently as she spoke. "He and Charlie run this place with just the two of them most of the time. Got about 60 head of cattle and some horses they're breaking for the army." Katherine slipped behind a screen in the corner to change into the simple cotton dress Mary had provided. It was a little loose but clean and whole, unlike her own tattered garment. "How long have you been here?" she asked as she emerged, running her fingers through her tangled hair. "Oh, I'm not permanent," Mary chuckled. "I live in town Willow Creek, about 10 miles east. I come out to help when Jack needs an extra pair of hands. Charlie rode in to fetch me last night after Jack found you." "Willow Creek," Katherine repeated. "Is it a large town?" "Not especially, but we've got what we need. General store, blacksmith, doctor, school, even got a church now, built it 3 years back." Mary stood and carefully transferred Eliza to Katherine's arms. "Jack says you were headed somewhere when the robbery happened." Katherine nodded, breathing in the clean, milky scent of her daughter. "San Antonio. My husband's brother has a business there. He offered James a position." She swallowed hard at the mention of her husband's name. "I suppose that's not an option anymore." Mary patted her shoulder sympathetically. "Let's get some breakfast in you, and then you can talk to Jack about what comes next." The kitchen was warm and filled with the aroma of coffee and frying bacon. Jack stood at the stove, his back to them as they entered. He had removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. "Morning," he said without turning. "Coffee's hot if you want some, Mrs. Williams." "Katherine, please," she said. "And yes, coffee would be wonderful." He turned then, and Katherine was struck by how different he looked in the daylight. His face was tanned from long days in the sun, with lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he smiled, as he did now. He was not young, perhaps early 40s, but there was a strength and vitality about him that was immediately apparent. "Katherine," he said, nodding. "How's the little one this morning?" "Better, thanks to you and Mary. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found us." Jack's expression darkened briefly. "Let's not dwell on that. You're here now, and you're safe." He placed a plate of bacon and eggs before her, along with a steaming cup of coffee. Katherine realized she was ravenously hungry, despite the stew she'd eaten the night before. "I need to ask," Jack said as he sat down across from her with his own plate. "Those bandits who attacked your stagecoach, can you describe them?" Katherine paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "There were 3 of them. One had a scar across his cheek and another wore a red bandana. The third was older with a gray beard. They called him Boss." Jack and Charlie exchanged a significant look. "Sounds like the Fuller gang," Charlie said. "They've been hitting stagecoaches between here and San Antonio for months now. Sheriff Blake's been trying to track them down," Jack added. "No luck so far. They killed my husband," Katherine said quietly, "and the driver left us for dead on the open plain." Jack's jaw tightened. We'll ride into town today, speak to the sheriff. He should know what happened." "I don't want to be any trouble," Katherine began, but Jack cut her off. "It's no trouble. I need supplies anyway, and you should meet Doc Wilson, have him check over you and Eliza." Mary bounced Eliza gently in her arms. "And we need to get some proper things for this little one. Diapers, clothes, another bottle." Katherine felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I have no money, they took everything." "Don't worry about that now," Jack said firmly. "We'll figure something out." After breakfast, Jack saddled 2 horses while Charlie hitched a wagon. "Mary will take you and Eliza in the wagon," Jack explained. "I'll ride alongside, safer that way." The journey to Willow Creek took just over an hour. As they traveled, Katherine found herself studying Jack's profile as he rode beside them. There was something reassuring about his presence, a quiet confidence that made her feel protected despite the open vulnerability of the landscape around them. Willow Creek turned out to be a single street of wooden buildings, with a few houses scattered on the outskirts. It wasn't much, but to Katherine, who had spent the last days in the wilderness, it looked like civilization. Their first stop was the sheriff's office, a small building with a jail cell visible through the back window. Sheriff Blake was a portly man with a bushy mustache who listened gravely as Katherine recounted the stagecoach robbery and her husband's murder. "Fuller gang, sure enough," he confirmed when she finished. "Been meaning to organize a posse, but folks around here are farmers and ranchers, not gunmen." He looked at Jack. "You found the lady where?" "About 7 miles west of my place, near Cottonwood Creek." The sheriff scratched his chin. "That means they're operating further north than before. I'll send wires to the other counties, let them know." "What about my husband's body?" Katherine asked. "It's in a shallow grave. He deserves a proper burial." Sheriff Blake nodded sympathetically. "I'll send some men out there tomorrow, madam. We'll bring him back, do right by him." Their next stop was the doctor's office. Dr. Wilson was a kind-faced man with spectacles who examined both Katherine and Eliza thoroughly. "The baby's in good health, considering," he pronounced. "But you, Mrs. Williams, are suffering from exhaustion and the beginnings of malnourishment. You need rest and good food for at least a week." "She'll get it," Jack said from the doorway. "I've invited Mrs. Williams to stay at the ranch until she's back on her feet." Katherine looked at him in surprise. They hadn't discussed this arrangement. "That's mighty generous of you, Jack," Dr. Wilson remarked, giving him a curious look. Outside the doctor's office, Katherine pulled Jack aside. "I can't impose on you like this," she said. "Surely there's a boarding house in town where Eliza and I could stay." Jack's expression was unreadable. "Mrs. Richards does have rooms for rent, but as you pointed out earlier, you have no money. The ranch has plenty of space, and Mary's willing to stay on a while to help with the baby." "And what would I do to earn my keep?" Katherine asked. "I won't be a charity case, Mr. Lawson." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Jack, please, and I'm sure we can find ways for you to contribute. Can you cook?" "Yes, quite well. Charlie and I are tired of our own cooking." "And there's mending, gardening, plenty of work if you're looking for it." Katherine hesitated, weighing her limited options. "Just until I can make other arrangements," she finally conceded. "Of course." He tipped his hat and turned toward the general store. "Now let's get those supplies." The general store was owned by a friendly couple named the Andersons, who were visibly shocked by Katherine's story. Mrs. Anderson immediately began gathering baby items, diapers, gowns, bottles, and refused payment when Jack reached for his wallet. "Consider it a welcome to Willow Creek," she said firmly. "We take care of our own here." "But I'm not," Katherine began. "You are now, dear," Mrs. Anderson interrupted with a smile. "Jack Lawson doesn't bring just anyone to town." After gathering all the necessary supplies, they had lunch at the small cafe next to the general store. As they ate, Katherine noticed several townspeople stopping by their table, ostensibly to greet Jack, but clearly curious about her. "You're well respected here," she observed after an elderly farmer had stopped to chat. Jack shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the observation. "Been here 15 years. People get used to you." "Jack's being modest," Mary said, bouncing Eliza on her knee. "When the drought hit 3 years back, he shared his well water with half the farms around here. And when the Thorntons' place burned down last winter, he was first to offer them shelter and help rebuild." Jack's face reddened slightly. "Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," Mary said pointedly. "You did." As they were preparing to leave town, Katherine noticed Jack speaking with the telegraph operator. He returned to the wagon looking troubled. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Just sending a message to the army post about those horses I'm breaking," he replied. But something in his tone suggested there was more to it. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, with Eliza sleeping contentedly in Katherine's arms. The events of the day had left her feeling overwhelmed and emotional. Her husband was dead. She was alone in a strange place with a newborn, and she was completely dependent on the kindness of a man she had known for less than a day. "You're thinking too hard," Jack said suddenly, breaking into her thoughts. "I can practically hear the wheels turning." Despite herself, Katherine smiled. "Is it that obvious?" "Your face gives you away," he replied. "Whatever you're worrying about, it can wait until tomorrow." "I was thinking about James," she admitted. "Wondering if I should try to reach his brother in San Antonio, explain what happened." Jack nodded. "We can send a telegram tomorrow if you like. What was his brother's name?" "Thomas Williams. He owns a hardware store." "I'll have the operator send a message first thing." When they arrived back at the ranch, Charlie met them at the gate with news. "Riders came by while you were gone," he reported, "looking for a woman and baby." Katherine felt her blood run cold. "The bandits?" "Don't think so," Charlie replied. "Well-dressed fellas said they were from the stage company investigating the robbery." Jack's expression hardened. "Did they say where they were staying?" "Mentioned they'd be at the hotel in Riverside for a few days." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "Keep the gates locked tonight, just in case. And Charlie, sleep in the bunkhouse instead of your cabin. I want someone near the main house." "You think they weren't really from the stage company?" Katherine asked as they entered the house. "Stage companies don't usually send investigators dressed in fine clothes," Jack replied. "And they definitely don't come asking about survivors before checking with the local sheriff." The implication sent a chill through Katherine. "You think they were with the Fuller gang?" "Coming to finish what they started." Jack's eyes met hers, and the grim determination she saw there was answer enough. "Mary, would you take Eliza for a moment?" Katherine asked, suddenly needing to be alone. In the bedroom, Katherine sat on the edge of the bed, trying to control the trembling that had overtaken her body. The door opened quietly, and Jack entered, carrying a glass of water. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering it to her. She accepted it gratefully, taking a sip before speaking. "Why would they come looking for us? We're no threat to them." Jack sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Sometimes bandits worry about witnesses, or maybe they think you have something they want." Katherine frowned. "Like what?" "They took everything of value." "Did your husband carry anything special?" "Documents, maybe," she thought for a moment, then gasped softly. "His journal." James always kept a small journal in his coat pocket. He wrote everything down: accounts, contacts, plans. "And he was going to work for his brother's business," Jack mused. "Could be important information in there. But they would have found it when they robbed us." Jack shook his head. "Not if it fell out during the struggle, or if your husband hid it." Katherine closed her eyes, trying to remember the chaotic moments of the attack. Before they shot him, James embraced me. It was strange, almost forceful. I thought he was just trying to protect me, but he might have slipped something into your pocket or bag, Jack suggested. Katherine suddenly stood, reaching for the torn dress she had been wearing when Jack found her. She searched the pockets, finding nothing, then examined the lining of the bodice. There, in a small tear near the seam, she felt something hard. Carefully, she extracted a small leather-bound journal. "He must have put it there during the embrace," she whispered. "I never even felt it." Jack took the journal from her trembling hands and flipped through it. Lots of numbers, names, looks like business dealings. James was helping his brother secure Army contracts for his hardware store, Katherine explained. He had connections from his time in the military. "Army contracts can mean big money," Jack said thoughtfully. "And where there's money, there are people willing to kill for it," Katherine finished, a new fear gripping her heart. "What do we do?" Jack closed the journal and handed it back to her. "First, we keep you and Eliza safe. Tomorrow I'll ride to Riverside, see who these investigators really are." "That could be dangerous." "I can handle myself," he assured her. "For now, try to get some rest." As he turned to leave, Katherine reached out and caught his hand. "Thank you, Jack, for everything." His fingers tightened briefly around hers before he withdrew. "Just doing what anyone would do." "No," she said softly. "Not anyone." That night, Katherine found it difficult to sleep despite her exhaustion. Every sound made her start, convinced that the bandits had found them. Eliza, however, slept peacefully in a makeshift cradle Charlie had constructed from a wooden crate. Around midnight, Katherine gave up on sleep and slipped from the bed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The house was quiet as she made her way to the kitchen, intending to make a cup of tea. She was surprised to find Jack sitting at the table, a rifle within reach, staring out the window at the moonlit yard. "You should be sleeping," he said without turning. "So should you." He glanced at her then, his expression softening. "I'm used to odd hours, comes with ranching." "And keeping watch for bandits?" she asked, taking a seat across from him. The corner of his mouth lifted in a half-smile. "That too." Katherine studied him in the dim light. There was something about Jack Lawson that intrigued her, a depth beneath the stoic exterior. "Mary mentioned you know what it's like to lose someone," she said carefully. His posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Mary talks too much. She cares about you." Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I had a wife once, Sarah, and a son, David." Katherine waited silently, sensing there was more to the story. "Cholera took them both," he continued after a long pause. 10 years ago, David was just 5. "I'm so sorry," Katherine whispered. "It was a long time ago." His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but his eyes told a different story. "Time doesn't always heal as they say it does," she observed quietly. Jack's gaze met hers, and for a moment, there was a connection, a recognition of shared grief that transcended their brief acquaintance. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." The moment was broken by Eliza's cry from the bedroom. Katherine rose quickly. "I should go to her." Jack nodded. "Try to get some rest, Katherine. Tomorrow may be a long day." When she returned to the bedroom with Eliza, Katherine found herself thinking about Jack's revelation. The loss of his family explained much about him, his solitary existence on this remote ranch, his instinct to help a widow and orphan child, the sadness that seemed to linger behind his eyes even when he smiled. For the first time since James's death, Katherine found her thoughts dwelling on someone other than her late husband. The realization brought a surge of guilt that kept her awake long after Eliza had returned to sleep. Dawn broke clear and bright over the ranch. Katherine awoke to find Mary already up and feeding Eliza. The older woman smiled as Katherine stirred. "Jack's already gone," she said. "Rode out at first light to Riverside." Katherine sat up abruptly. He went alone to find those men. Said he was just going to look around, gather information. Charlie went with him as far as the crossroads, then split off to fetch the sheriff and some men to recover your husband's body. Katherine felt a mixture of gratitude and concern. Jack was risking himself for her and Eliza, people he barely knew. The day passed slowly, with Katherine helping Mary with household chores to keep her mind occupied. She found comfort in the routine tasks kneading bread dough, hanging laundry, sweeping the wooden floors. It was almost possible to imagine this was her life, that she belonged here in this peaceful place. By late afternoon, there was still no sign of Jack or Charlie. Mary tried to hide her worry, but Katherine could see it in the way she frequently glanced out the windows toward the road. "This isn't like Jack," Mary admitted as they prepared supper. "He said he'd be back by midday." Katherine's stomach knotted with anxiety. What if something happened to him? What if those men, Jack can take care of himself? Mary interrupted firmly. He was a Texas Ranger before he bought this ranch. There's not many men who'd get the better of him in a fair fight. A Texas Ranger, Katherine repeated, surprised. He never mentioned that. Jack doesn't talk much about his past, Mary said, chopping vegetables with quick, efficient movements. After Sarah and David died, he left the Rangers, bought this place, said he was done with violence. The sun was setting when they finally heard hoofbeats approaching. Mary grabbed the rifle from above the door before cautiously peering out the window. "It's Jack," she announced with relief, setting the weapon aside. "And Charlie's with him." Katherine rushed to the door, Eliza in her arms as the two men dismounted. Jack looked tired but unharmed, though there was a grin set to his mouth that suggested the news wasn't good. "The men in Riverside were definitely not from the stage company," he reported once they were inside. "Got the bartender talking, said they've been asking all over town about a woman with a baby who survived the stagecoach robbery." "Did they say why they were looking for her?" Mary asked. Jack shook his head. "But they're offering money for information, a lot of money." "And my husband," Katherine asked quietly, "were Charlie and the sheriff able to recover his body?" Charlie nodded solemnly. "Yes, madam. Sheriff and his men are bringing him to town tomorrow. Funeral can be day after if that suits you." Katherine swallowed hard. "Yes, thank you." Later that evening, after Mary had retired to the spare room and Charlie had returned to the bunkhouse, Katherine found Jack on the porch, smoking a cigarette and staring out at the darkness. "I never thanked you properly," she said, joining him at the railing, "for going to Riverside today." He exhaled a stream of smoke. "Didn't accomplish much. You confirmed those men aren't who they claim to be. That's something." Jack turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Katherine, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She nodded, her pulse quickening. "Of course. Is there anything else your husband might have been carrying? Anything that someone might kill to get back?" Katherine thought carefully before answering. James was an honest man. He worked for the quartermaster's office during the war, then as a clerk for a shipping company in St. Louis after. The only valuable thing he possessed was the information in that journal connections, figures for potential Army contracts. Jack frowned. "That's what doesn't make sense. Business information, even valuable contracts, wouldn't normally drive men to murder and then hunt down witnesses. Unless," Katherine said slowly, a terrible thought occurring to her, "the information in the journal could prove something illegal." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Like what?" James mentioned once that his brother had connections to some government officials who weren't entirely above board. He didn't approve, but Thomas insisted it was just how business was done. Katherine wrung her hands anxiously. "What if the journal contains evidence of corruption? Bribes, kickbacks?" "That would certainly give someone motive," Jack agreed. "Have you read through it yourself?" Katherine shook her head. I glanced at it, but much of it is in a sort of shorthand James developed during the war. I recognize some names, but the numbers and abbreviations mean nothing to me. We should take another look, Jack suggested. Together. Inside, they spread the journal on the kitchen table. Jack lit an extra lamp to provide better light as they pored over the small, neat handwriting that filled the pages. Here, Katherine said, pointing to an entry. This name Colonel Westfield James mentioned him several times in his letters. He oversees procurement for forts in this region. Jack's expression darkened. I know Westfield by reputation. There have been rumors about him for years, inflated contracts, missing supplies. They continued through the journal, and Katherine's heart sank as the picture became clearer. Her husband had unknowingly documented what appeared to be a scheme involving his brother Thomas, Colonel Westfield, and several other officials and businessmen. The journal detailed inflated prices, fictional orders, and payments that could only be described as bribes. James didn't know, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. He was just recording the information Thomas gave him, preparing for his new position. He would never have been part of something like this. Jack placed his hand over hers. I believe you. But whoever is behind this doesn't know that or doesn't care. They just want the journal. The men looking for me, do you think they work for Colonel Westfield? Or for someone connected to him? Jack agreed. Either way, they're dangerous men. Katherine looked down at the journal, feeling as though it burned her fingers. What do we do with this information? Jack considered for a moment. There's a federal marshal I know in San Antonio. Honest man. He'd know how to handle this. Then we should get this to him as soon as possible, Katherine said decisively. It's not that simple, Jack cautioned. Those men are watching the roads, and there may be others. We need to be careful. What about the funeral? Katherine asked. I have to go into town for James's funeral. Jack nodded. We'll all go together. Safety in numbers. After that, I'll find a way to get the journal to Marshal Reeves. As they gathered the pages of the journal, their hands brushed, and Katherine felt a jolt of awareness that startled her. She looked up to find Jack watching her, an unreadable expression in his eyes. We should try to get some sleep, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Tomorrow will be a difficult day for you. Yes, she agreed, withdrawing her hand. Good night, Jack. Good night, Katherine. In her room, Katherine sat on the edge of the bed, troubled by her conflicting emotions. Her husband had been dead less than a week, and tomorrow she would bury him. Yet here she was, feeling something, attraction, connection. She wasn't sure what for another man. The guilt was overwhelming. I'm sorry, James, she whispered into the darkness. I'm so sorry. Morning brought overcast skies fitting for a funeral day. Katherine dressed in the black morning dress Mrs. Anderson had altered for her, and Mary helped her arrange her hair beneath a simple black bonnet. Eliza, unaware of the somber occasion, gurgled happily as Mary dressed her in a clean white gown. Jack and Charlie waited for them by the wagon, both men wearing clean shirts and dark vests in respect for the occasion. Jack helped Katherine into the wagon, his hand lingering supportively at her elbow. You don't have to do this alone, he said quietly. Katherine managed a grateful smile. I know. The small church in Willow Creek was nearly full when they arrived. Katherine was surprised by the turnout, people she had never met, coming to pay respects to a stranger. Word spreads fast in small towns, Jack explained, noting her confusion. And folks here have strong feelings about the Fuller gang. The service was simple but dignified. The pastor spoke of life's brevity and the promise of reunion beyond death. Katherine sat dry-eyed through most of it, her grief too deep for tears, her arms holding Eliza as if the child were a lifeline to reality. At the graveside, as the plain wooden coffin was lowered into the earth, Katherine finally allowed herself to weep. Jack stood beside her, a steady presence, his hand occasionally touching her shoulder in silent support. After the final prayers, the townspeople came forward one by one to offer condolences. Many brought food or small gifts for Eliza. Katherine was overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. "Your husband will have justice, Mrs. Williams," Sheriff Blake promised as he shook her hand. "We'll find the Fuller gang." "Thank you, Sheriff," she replied. "But please be careful. I fear these men may be more dangerous than we realized." As the crowd dispersed, Katherine noticed two unfamiliar men standing apart, watching the proceedings with interest. They were well-dressed, city men by the look of them, and something about their manner set alarm bells ringing in Katherine's mind. She touched Jack's arm and nodded subtly toward them. His expression hardened as he recognized the threat. "Those are the men from Riverside," he said under his breath. "We need to leave, now." "They've seen us," Katherine whispered, panic rising. "They know I'm here." "It's all right," Jack assured her, though his hand moved to rest near his holstered revolver. "We're surrounded by townspeople. They won't try anything here." Sure enough, the two men merely tipped their hats in Katherine's direction before turning and walking away toward the hotel. "They're sending a message," Jack said grimly, "letting you know they've found you." They returned to the ranch in tense silence, constantly checking the road behind them for followers. Charlie rode ahead and behind, ensuring they weren't being tracked. "They'll come for the journal," Katherine said as they approached the ranch. "Tonight, maybe," Jack nodded. "I know. Charlie and I will be ready. Mary will take you and Eliza to the root cellar if there's trouble. It's well hidden and secure." But Katherine shook her head firmly. "No, I won't hide while you risk your lives for me. This is my fight." "Katherine, James died protecting us," she interrupted. "I won't let anyone else meet the same fate." Jack's expression softened. "Your husband would want you to survive to raise your daughter." "And I intend to," Katherine replied, "but not as a woman who hides while others fight her battles." They stared at each other for a long moment, a silent battle of wills. Finally, Jack's mouth quirked in a reluctant smile. "You're a stubborn woman, Katherine Williams. So I've been told." Back at the ranch, they prepared for a potential attack. Jack and Charlie checked their weapons and positioned them strategically around the house. Mary prepared a cold supper that could be eaten quickly, and Katherine packed a small bag with essentials for Eliza, just in case they needed to flee. The journal was hidden in a false bottom of a flour barrel, an old hiding place Jack had used during his ranger days. As darkness fell, the tension in the house grew. Jack positioned Charlie on the porch while he kept watch from an upstairs window. Katherine and Mary remained in the kitchen with Eliza, speaking in hushed voices. "Jack was different today," Mary observed as she rocked Eliza gently. "The way he looked at you." Katherine felt her cheeks warm. "He's a kind man helping someone in need, nothing more." Mary's knowing smile suggested she didn't believe that for a moment. "I've known Jack Lawson for 12 years, since he first came to these parts. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." "It's too soon," Katherine whispered, shame coloring her words. "James isn't even cold in his grave." "Life doesn't always wait for our grief to end," Mary said gently. "Especially out here where each day is uncertain." Before Katherine could respond, a low whistle from outside caught their attention. Jack appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Riders coming," he said quietly. "At least 4. Charlie's moving the horses to the back corral." Mary immediately stood, clutching Eliza. "I'll take the baby to the root cellar." Katherine felt torn, but one look at her daughter's innocent face decided her. "I'll come with you." Jack nodded, relief evident in his eyes. "Stay there until one of us comes for you. The password is sunrise. Don't open for anyone who doesn't say it." Mary led Katherine through the pantry to a trapdoor hidden beneath a rug. The root cellar below was surprisingly spacious, with shelves of preserved food lining the walls and a small bench in one corner. Jack reinforced this place years ago, Mary explained as she lit a small lantern. Said it was for tornadoes, but I always suspected it was for times like this. They settled on the bench, Eliza sleeping peacefully despite the tension. Above them, they could hear the muffled sounds of movement in the house. "Will they be all right?" Katherine whispered. Mary squeezed her hand. "Jack and Charlie are two of the toughest men I know. And they have right on their side." Time passed with excruciating slowness in the dim cellar. Every sound from above made Katherine start. She strained to hear voices or gunshots, but the thick walls muffled most sounds. After what seemed like hours, they heard heavy footsteps overhead, followed by the scraping of the trapdoor being opened. Katherine clutched Eliza tighter as light spilled into the cellar. "Sunrise," came Jack's voice, and Katherine sagged with relief. Jack helped them out of the cellar, and Katherine immediately noticed the cut on his cheek and the way he favored his left arm. "You're hurt," she gasped. "It's nothing," he dismissed. "Just a graze." The kitchen showed signs of a struggle: an overturned chair, a broken window. Charlie sat at the table, pressing a cloth to a bleeding gash on his forehead. "What happened?" Mary demanded, immediately moving to check Charlie's wound. "They came looking for the journal," Jack explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. "4 of them, just as we thought. They weren't expecting resistance. Did you?" Katherine couldn't finish the question. "2 ran off," Charlie supplied. "One's tied up in the barn, the 4th won't be troubling anyone ever again." Katherine closed her eyes briefly, trying to process the reality that a man had died tonight because of her. Jack seemed to read her thoughts. "He gave us no choice, Katherine. He was going to kill Charlie." "I know," she whispered. "It's just so much death." "The one in the barn talked," Jack continued after a moment. "Confirmed what we suspected. They work for Colonel Westfield. The journal contains enough evidence to send the colonel and several others to prison for a long time." "What do we do now?" Jack's expression was resolute. "We need to get that journal to Marshal Reeves in San Antonio, tonight, before Westfield sends more men." "I'll go," Charlie volunteered, wincing as Mary cleaned his wound. "No," Jack countered. "You're hurt and I need you here to protect the ranch." He turned to Katherine. "I'll take the journal. You and Eliza will stay here with Mary and Charlie." Katherine shook her head. "No, the journal isn't the only evidence I am. I can identify the men who killed James, and I can verify that he collected this information innocently, without knowing its implications." "It's too dangerous," Jack argued. "More dangerous than staying here where they've already found us once," Katherine challenged. "They'll keep coming, Jack. As long as I have that journal, as long as I can testify against them, they'll never stop." Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "And Eliza? Would you risk your daughter?" "I risk her more by staying," Katherine insisted. "At least in San Antonio, with the federal marshal's protection, we might have a chance at a normal life." Their eyes locked in another silent battle of wills. Finally, Jack sighed heavily. "We leave in an hour," he conceded. "Pack only what you absolutely need." The night was clear and cold as Jack helped Katherine onto his best horse, handing Eliza up to her. The baby was bundled warmly, sleeping despite the commotion. "The pack horse has supplies," Jack explained, checking the saddle on his own mount. "Stick close to me, and if I tell you to run, you ride hard and don't look back." "I won't leave you," Katherine said firmly. Jack looked up at her, his expression softening. "Stubborn woman." Mary hugged Katherine fiercely before they left. "God go with you," she whispered, "and come back to us when this is over." The journey to San Antonio would normally take 3 days, but Jack planned to push harder, taking shortcuts and traveling through the night when possible. "We have maybe a day's head start," he explained as they rode through the darkness. "The man we captured won't be missed until tomorrow, but once Westfield realizes he's lost contact with his men, he'll send others." They rode until the first light of dawn began to streak the eastern sky, stopping only when Eliza needed feeding or changing. Katherine was exhausted but refused to complain, aware that Jack had slept even less than she had. They made camp in a small grove of trees near a stream, well off the main trail. Jack insisted Katherine rest while he kept watch. "You can't go without sleep indefinitely," she protested as she laid Eliza down on a blanket. "I've gone longer," he assured her. "Rest now. We'll ride again at midday." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Katherine. She watched Jack as he sat with his back against a tree, rifle across his lap, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly, not expecting him to hear. But he turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "Doing what? Risking everything for us." "Your ranch, your life. You barely know me." Jack was silent for so long that Katherine thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and reflective. "When Sarah and David died, I was away. Ranger business. By the time I got home, it was too late." His gaze dropped to the ground. "I couldn't save them, but maybe I can save you and Eliza." Katherine's heart ached for him. "It wasn't your fault, Jack." "I know that," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But it doesn't change how it feels." "And is that all this is?" she pressed. "Atonement." His eyes met hers, and there was something in them, a vulnerability, a question that made her breath catch. "No," he said simply. "It's not just that." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Finally, Jack looked away, back to the vigilant scanning of their surroundings. "Try to sleep, Katherine. We have a long ride ahead." They continued their journey at midday, making good time across the open plains. Jack was familiar with the territory, choosing paths that kept them concealed as much as possible while still allowing for speed. By nightfall of the second day, they had covered more than half the distance to San Antonio. They camped that night in an abandoned line shack Jack knew of, which offered better shelter than their previous night under the stars. The small one-room structure was dusty but sound, with a stone fireplace where Jack built a small fire to ward off the night's chill. Katherine fed and changed Eliza, grateful for the relative comfort of 4 walls and a roof. "How much further?" she asked as they shared a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. "If we push hard, we could reach San Antonio by tomorrow night," Jack replied. "But that would mean riding straight through, with minimal stops." Katherine looked down at Eliza, who was beginning to fuss. The journey had been hard on the infant, despite Katherine's best efforts to keep her comfortable. "She needs a proper rest," Katherine acknowledged reluctantly. "And so do we," Jack nodded. "We'll stay here until dawn, then make as much progress as we can tomorrow. There's a small settlement about halfway to San Antonio. We can rest there briefly if needed." As they prepared for the night, Jack insisted on taking the first watch again. Katherine, however, was equally insistent that he get some rest. "You haven't slept properly in days," she argued. "You'll be no good to any of us if you collapse from exhaustion." After some debate, Jack grudgingly agreed to sleep for a few hours while Katherine kept watch. She settled by the door with his rifle across her lap, Eliza sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle nearby. Outside, the night was alive with the sounds of crickets and the occasional distant howl of a coyote. Katherine found herself reflecting on the extraordinary turn her life had taken in the span of a week. She had lost her husband, discovered his unwitting involvement in corruption, fled for her life, and now was journeying to San Antonio with a man who was rapidly becoming important to her in ways she wasn't ready to examine. She glanced at Jack's sleeping form. In sleep, the hard lines of his face softened, making him appear younger, less burdened. Katherine felt a surge of affection that both warmed and troubled her. "It's too soon," she whispered to herself, yet her heart seemed to pay no attention to propriety or appropriate timing. Jack stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. Rather than looking away in embarrassment, Katherine held his gaze. "Your turn to rest," he said, sitting up. "I can take it from here." "I'm not tired," she lied. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Stubborn." "Practical," she countered. "One of us needs to be alert tomorrow." Jack moved to sit beside her at the door, taking the rifle. "We both do, which is why you're going to sleep now and I'll wake you at dawn." Their shoulders brushed as he settled next to her, and Katherine was acutely aware of his proximity. She should move, she knew, but found herself reluctant to break the connection. "Katherine," Jack said softly, his voice rougher than usual, "you should get some sleep." "Yes," she agreed, but made no move to leave. In the flickering firelight, his eyes were dark and unreadable as they studied her face. Katherine felt her heart beating faster as he slowly, hesitantly, reached up to brush a strand of hair from her cheek. "This is—" he began, then stopped. "Complicated," she finished for him. "Yes." His hand dropped away. "And not the time or place," Katherine nodded, feeling both disappointment and relief. "You're right." She moved to the blankets near the fire, lying down with her back to him. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was long in coming, her mind filled with thoughts of the man keeping watch at the door and the uncertain future that awaited them in San Antonio. Dawn came all too soon, gray light filtering through the small window of the lined shack. They broke camp quickly and were on the trail as the sun crested the horizon. The day proved challenging. Twice they spotted riders in the distance and had to divert from their path to avoid detection. Eliza was fussier than usual, perhaps sensing the tension that surrounded them. By mid-afternoon, they reached the small settlement Jack had mentioned, little more than a trading post, a saloon, and a few scattered houses. They stopped only long enough to water the horses and allow Katherine to tend to Eliza's needs. "We're being followed," Jack said quietly as Katherine rejoined him outside the trading post. "Two riders, keeping their distance but definitely tracking us." Katherine's heart raced with fear. "Westfield's men, most likely. We need to move fast, but they're going to catch up eventually. The horses can't maintain this pace much longer." "What do we do?" Jack's expression was grim. "There's a canyon about 5 miles ahead, narrow passage, high walls, good place for an ambush either by them or by us." "You want to confront them?" Katherine asked, alarmed. "Better on our terms than theirs," Jack reasoned. "And better, too, than the larger force that's probably gathering in San Antonio by now." Katherine knew he was right, but the thought of more violence, more death, made her physically ill. Yet what choice did they have? These men wouldn't stop coming until they had the journal and had silenced both Katherine and Jack permanently. "All right," she agreed reluctantly. "What's the plan?" They rode hard for the canyon, pushing their tired horses to the limit. As they entered the narrow passage, Jack quickly outlined his strategy. "There's a cutback about halfway through, large enough to hide you and Eliza. I'll continue on, make it look like we're both still riding. When they follow, they'll be caught between us." Katherine shook her head vehemently. "I'm not letting you face them alone." "Katherine, please," Jack said, his voice urgent. "I need to know you and Eliza are safe, and I need to know you survive this," she retorted. "2 guns are better than 1, Jack, you know that." They argued briefly, precious minutes ticking by until Jack finally conceded. You stay hidden until I engage them. Only then do you show yourself, understand? And if it goes badly, you take Eliza and you ride. Promise me." Katherine nodded, though they both knew it was a promise she might not keep. The cutback was a small alcove in the canyon wall, partially obscured by scrub brush. Jack helped Katherine dismount, then quickly rearranged her saddle to make it appear she was still riding. He would lead her horse behind his own. "Be careful," she whispered as he prepared to leave. Jack hesitated, then suddenly pulled her close, his lips meeting hers in a brief, fierce kiss. Before Katherine could react, he had mounted his horse and was riding away, leading her mount behind him. Katherine touched her fingers to her lips, stunned by the unexpected kiss and the emotions it stirred. Then, remembering the gravity of their situation, she positioned herself at the edge of the alcove, rifle ready, Eliza secured in a sling across her chest. The weight was excruciating. Every sound echoed in the canyon, the wind, distant birds, the occasional fall of loose rock. Finally, she heard the approach of horses, moving cautiously. Jack had passed out of sight around a bend in the canyon. Katherine strained to hear, to glimpse what was happening. The riders she could now see, there were indeed two of them, passed her hiding place without noticing, their attention focused ahead. Then came the sound she had been dreading, a gunshot, followed quickly by more. Katherine's heart hammered in her chest as she carefully peeked around the edge of the alcove. Jack had dismounted and taken cover behind a boulder. The two pursuers had also dismounted, one taking shelter behind an outcropping while the other lay motionless on the ground. With trembling hands, Katherine raised the rifle, taking careful aim at the remaining pursuer. She had never fired at a human being before, but Eliza's weight against her chest reminded her of what was at stake. The man moved, exposing himself briefly as he tried to get a better angle on Jack. Katherine squeezed the trigger. The shot went wide, striking rock near the man's head. He spun, eyes searching for the new threat, and Jack seized the opportunity. His next shot found its mark and the pursuer fell. Katherine emerged from hiding, rifle still ready, and ran to where Jack stood. His left arm was bleeding from a fresh wound, but he was alive. "You're hurt," she said, lowering the rifle. "Just a graze," he assured her, though his face was pale with pain. "We need to move. Those shots might have been heard." They gathered the pursuers' weapons and ammunition, then mounted their horses again. Jack insisted they continue through the canyon rather than backtrack, reasoning that any reinforcements would likely approach from the direction they had come. Katherine rode alongside Jack now, constantly checking his wound, which he had hastily bandaged with a strip of cloth. He was losing blood, and she could see the effort it took for him to remain upright in the saddle. "We need to stop. Tend to your arm properly," she insisted as they emerged from the canyon into open country. "Not yet," he said through gritted teeth. "Need more distance." They rode for another hour before Jack finally conceded to necessity. They stopped near a small creek, hidden by a stand of cottonwood trees. Katherine helped him dismount, alarmed at how heavily he leaned on her. "Let me see," she said, carefully removing the blood-soaked bandage. The bullet had carved a deep furrow along his upper arm. It wasn't life-threatening, but it had bled significantly and needed proper cleaning to prevent infection. "I need to clean this," she told him, easing him down to sit with his back against a tree. "It's going to hurt." Jack managed a weak smile. "I've had worse." Katherine used water from the creek and a clean cloth from her pack to carefully cleanse the wound. Jack remained stoic, though she felt him tense at the pain. "Thank you," he said as she wrapped a fresh bandage around his arm. "For back there, that shot of yours gave me the opening I needed." "I missed," Katherine admitted, securing the bandage with a knot. "But you distracted him. That was enough." Jack caught her hand as she withdrew it from his arm. "You saved my life." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "We saved each other," she corrected softly. Jack's hand tightened on hers. "Katherine, about what happened before at the alcove. You don't need to explain," she interrupted, suddenly uncertain whether she was ready for this conversation. "I think I do," he insisted. "It wasn't just the moment or the danger. I've felt something for you since I found you under that oak tree." Katherine looked down at their joined hands, emotions warring within her. "It's too soon," she whispered. "James has only been gone a week." "I know," Jack acknowledged, "and I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know that what I feel is real, not circumstance, not pity." Katherine met his eyes again, seeing the sincerity there. "I feel it too," she admitted. "And it frightens me, Jack, not just because it's so soon, but because I don't know what the future holds for any of us." "None of us ever do," he said simply. "But whatever comes, I'd like to face it with you and Eliza, if you'll have me." Before Katherine could respond, Eliza began to fuss, demanding attention. The moment broke, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that could no longer be ignored. They rested for an hour, allowing Jack to regain some strength and giving the horses a much-needed break. When they resumed their journey, they rode side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing, a comfortable silence between them. By nightfall, they could see the distant lights of San Antonio. They made camp one last time, just a few miles outside the city, agreeing it would be safer to approach Marshal Reeves in daylight. "What happens after?" Katherine asked as they sat by a small fire, Eliza sleeping peacefully between them. "After we deliver the journal and give our testimony." Jack poked at the fire with a stick, considering. "Depends on how high this goes. Westfield has powerful friends. You might need protection for a while." "And then," she pressed. He looked up at her, firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Then it's up to you, Katherine. You could go anywhere, start fresh. Or," she encouraged when he paused, "or you could come back to Willow Creek," he said quietly. "To the ranch," Katherine smiled softly. "I think Eliza and I would like that very much." Jack's expression lightened. "It wouldn't be easy. Ranching's hard work, and I'm not. I'm not an easy man to live with, or so I've been told." "I'm not looking for easy," Katherine replied. "I'm looking for real, for a man who keeps his promises." She reached across the sleeping baby to take his hand. "A man who says you'll eat before dawn and makes it happen." Jack's fingers tightened around hers. "I can promise you that much at least. You and Eliza will never go hungry as long as I'm alive." They reached San Antonio shortly after noon the next day. The city was bustling with activity, a sharp contrast to the quiet of the trail and the isolation of Willow Creek. Katherine felt overwhelmed by the noise and the crowds, keeping Eliza close against her chest as they made their way to the federal building. Marshal Daniel Reeves was a tall, imposing man with a silver mustache and shrewd eyes. He listened carefully as Jack explained the situation, occasionally making notes in a small book. When Jack produced the journal, the marshal examined it with growing interest. "This is damning evidence," he confirmed. "Names, dates, amounts, enough to bring down not just Westfield but several officials in the War Department." "Will it be enough?" Katherine asked anxiously. "These are powerful men." Marshal Reeves nodded grimly. "Powerful, yes, but not above the law. Not in my jurisdiction." He closed the journal and looked at them seriously. "But I won't pretend this won't be dangerous. These men have already demonstrated they're willing to kill to protect themselves." "What do you suggest?" Jack asked. "You both need to stay somewhere secure while I assemble a team and begin making arrests. I have a safe house on the outskirts of town. No one knows about it except my most trusted deputies." The safe house turned out to be a modest farmhouse surrounded by open fields that offered clear views in all directions. 2 deputy marshals were assigned to guard the property, and Reeves promised to return within 3 days with news. For Katherine, the enforced inactivity after days of constant movement and danger was almost more difficult to bear than the journey had been. She paced the small house, watching the road, jumping at every sound. Jack, too, seemed restless, though his wounded arm forced him to move more carefully. He spent hours at the window, scanning the horizon with the vigilance of a man accustomed to danger. On the second day, as evening approached, they found themselves sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. Eliza was asleep inside, and the deputy on duty had tactfully made himself scarce, giving them a rare moment of privacy. "What will you do if this all works out?" Jack asked, breaking a comfortable silence. "If Westfield and the others are arrested, the danger passed." Katherine considered the question. "I think I already answered that. Eliza and I would come back to Willow Creek with you." "As what?" Jack's voice was careful, measured. "Guests, tenants." Katherine turned to look at him, understanding the question beneath his words. "What are you asking me, Jack Lawson?" He met her gaze steadily. "I'm asking if you might consider a future with me. Not right away, I know you need time to grieve, to heal, but someday." "Someday," she repeated softly. "Yes, I think I would consider that, very seriously." Jack's hand found hers on the porch railing. "I'm not a man of fancy words, Katherine, but I know what I feel. And what I feel for you and Eliza is something I thought I'd never feel again after Sarah and David." Katherine felt tears prick at her eyes. "I think James would have liked you," she said, surprising herself with the thought. "He always said the measure of a man was whether he kept his word. You promised we'd eat before dawn, and you've been keeping us safe and fed ever since." A smile tugged at Jack's mouth. "Pretty low bar for courtship." Katherine laughed, the sound startling in its unexpectedness. "Perhaps, but it's a good foundation." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Marshal Reeves, a day earlier than expected. His expression as he dismounted told them his news was urgent. "We've made the arrests," he announced without preamble. "Westfield, 2 War Department officials, and 3 businessmen, including Thomas Williams." Katherine gasped. "James's brother. You're certain?" Reeves nodded grimly. "He was at the center of it all. The Journal made that clear, and we found corroborating evidence in his office." "Does he know I'm here?" "That I have the Journal, he does now," Reeves confirmed. "Which is why I've come early. One of Westfield's men escaped custody. We have reason to believe he's heading this way." Jack was immediately on alert. "How many men with him?" "Unknown. But we need to move you both to a more secure location until the trial." "Where?" Katherine asked, already rising to collect Eliza. "There's a military fort about 30 miles west. You'll be under Army protection there." They packed quickly, leaving within the hour. Reeves and 3 deputies accompanied them, creating a protective escort as they traveled through the gathering darkness. The fort was imposing high walls, regular patrols, and a garrison of soldiers who snapped to attention at the marshal's arrival. Katherine and Eliza were given quarters in the officers' section, with Jack in an adjoining room. "We'll be safe here," Jack assured her as they settled in. "No one gets past an Army garrison." Katherine nodded but couldn't shake a feeling of foreboding. "How long will we need to stay?" "Until the trial," Reeves said. 2 weeks, perhaps 3. You'll both need to testify." 2 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Katherine and Jack fell into a routine, taking meals together, walking the perimeter of the fort in the evenings, spending time with Eliza. Their relationship deepened in these quiet moments, yet both were careful not to rush what was still a fragile new beginning. News came regularly from San Antonio. The case against Westfield and his conspirators was building steadily. Thomas Williams had apparently turned on his associates, offering testimony in exchange for leniency. He was afraid, Katherine mused when Reeves shared this information. James always said his brother was a coward at heart. Finally, the day came for them to return to San Antonio for the trial. Katherine was both nervous and resolute as they prepared to leave the fort. "Just tell the truth," Jack advised as they rode toward the city. "That's all you need to do." The courthouse was crowded when they arrived, with curious onlookers and reporters filling the benches. Katherine held Eliza close as she took her place on the witness stand, aware of the hostile stares from the defendant's table. Her testimony was straightforward. She explained how James had unwittingly collected information for his brother, believing it to be legitimate business. She identified the men who had attacked the stagecoach, confirmed the journal was in her husband's handwriting, and described the subsequent pursuit and attempts on her life. When questioned about Jack's involvement, she spoke with heartfelt gratitude of his intervention and protection. Their eyes met across the courtroom as she described finding her and Eliza beneath the oak tree and the simple promise he had made that had changed everything. "You'll eat before dawn, I promise." Jack's testimony followed, his manner calm and authoritative, drawing on his experience as a former Texas Ranger. He provided details about the men who had attacked the ranch, their connection to Westfield, and the evidence they had discovered in the journal. The trial lasted 4 days. In the end, the evidence was overwhelming. Colonel Westfield, Thomas Williams, and their associates were convicted on multiple counts of fraud, corruption, and in Westfield's case, conspiracy to commit murder. As they left the courthouse after the verdicts were read, Katherine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "It's over," she whispered, hardly believing it. Jack squeezed her hand. "Yes, you're free now, both of you. Free to go home?" she asked, looking up at him. The smile that spread across his face was answer enough. "If that's what you want." "It is," she assured him. "More than anything." The journey back to Willow Creek was peaceful, a stark contrast to their flight to San Antonio. They traveled at an easy pace, stopping when Eliza needed attention, camping under the stars without fear of pursuit. On their final night on the trail, camped just a few hours' ride from the ranch, Jack surprised Katherine with a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. "What's this?" she asked as she accepted it. "Open it and see," he replied, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his manner. Inside was a simple gold band, unadorned but beautifully crafted. Katherine looked up at him, her heart racing. "It was Sarah's," Jack explained quietly. "I've kept it all these years. I thought, if someday you felt ready, you might wear it." Tears filled Katherine's eyes. "Are you asking me to marry you, Jack Lawson?" "Not yet," he said carefully. "But someday, when you're ready, I want you to have it now as a promise." Katherine closed her hand around the ring. "A promise like you'll eat before dawn," a smile tugged at his mouth. "Just like that. One I intend to keep." She leaned forward and kissed him gently. "Then yes, I accept your promise, and when the time is right, I'll wear this ring proudly." They rode into the ranch the following afternoon to find Mary and Charlie waiting anxiously on the porch. Mary rushed forward to embrace them both, tears streaming down her face. "We were so worried," she exclaimed, taking Eliza from Katherine's arms and covering the baby with kisses. "When Jack's telegram came saying you were on your way home, I couldn't believe it. Home." The word resonated with Katherine as she looked around at the ranch that had been her sanctuary in the darkest moment of her life. "It's good to be back," Jack said, his arm slipping around Katherine's waist. Mary's eyes widened at the gesture and a knowing smile spread across her face. "I see some things have changed while you were away." Katherine felt her cheeks warm. "Some things," she agreed, "but slowly." That evening, after a celebratory dinner prepared by Mary, Katherine stood on the porch watching the sunset, Eliza sleeping peacefully in her arms. Jack joined her, leaning against the railing. "Happy?" he asked simply. Katherine nodded. "Yes." Though it seems strange to say that after everything that's happened. "Life goes on," Jack observed. "It has to." "Yes," she agreed. "And I want ours to go on together, Jack, here in this place that already feels like home." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I meant what I said about waiting, Katherine. I know it's only been weeks since James died. There's no rush." "No," she agreed. "No rush, but no need to deny what we both feel either." She shifted Eliza to one arm so she could take his hand. "James gave his life to protect us. I think the best way to honor his memory is to live fully, to love again, to give Eliza the family she deserves." Jack's fingers tightened around hers. "Is that what you want? A family?" "It's what I've always wanted," Katherine admitted. "And I think we've already started building one, haven't we?" The smile that transformed Jack's face was all the answer she needed. 6 months later, on a bright spring morning, Katherine Williams became Katherine Lawson in a simple ceremony at the Willow Creek Church. Eliza, now a robust 9-month-old with her father's eyes and her mother's determined spirit, watched from Mary's arms as Jack and Katherine exchanged vows. "I promise to love you, protect you, and provide for you and Eliza all the days of my life," Jack vowed, his voice steady and sure. "You'll never go hungry, never face danger alone as long as there's breath in my body." Katherine, tears shining in her eyes, made her own promise. "I will love you faithfully, stand beside you through all of life's challenges, and make a true home with you for our family." Their life together unfolded with the changing seasons. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Jack's knowledge of cattle and horses, complemented by Katherine's shrewd business sense. Eliza grew into a spirited toddler who followed Jack everywhere, delighting in learning about the animals and the land. A year after their wedding, Katherine gave birth to a son they named David James Lawson, in honor of both the boy Jack had lost and the husband Katherine had buried. The baby was strong and healthy, with Jack's dark hair and Katherine's determined chin. "He's perfect," Jack whispered the first time he held his son. Just like his mother, as the children grew, so did the ranch. Jack added more cattle, bred horses that became known throughout the territory for their quality, and built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. Katherine established a small school on the ranch for Eliza and David, eventually inviting the children from neighboring farms to attend. Her reputation as a teacher spread, and soon the school became an important part of the community. 5 years after they met beneath that lone oak tree, Katherine and Jack stood on their porch, watching Eliza chase fireflies in the twilight while David toddled after her on unsteady legs. "Did you ever imagine this?" Katherine asked, leaning against her husband's solid warmth. "That night when you found us, did you ever think we'd be here?" Jack's arm tightened around her waist. "No," he admitted. "I was just trying to get through one night, keep one promise." "You'll eat before dawn," Katherine quoted softly. "Such a simple promise." "The first of many I've kept," Jack reminded her, dropping a kiss on the top of her head. "And will continue to keep," she added, smiling up at him. "Until my dying day," he agreed. "And beyond if I have any say in it." Their life wasn't without challenges. Droughts came, as did harsh winters that threatened the cattle. There were injuries, illnesses, and the 1,000 natural worries of raising children on the frontier. But through it all, they faced each challenge together, drawing strength from each other and from the love that had grown from that first desperate meeting. A love born of a promise kept, a family saved, and a future redeemed from the ashes of tragedy. Years later, when Eliza was preparing to leave for college in the East, the first in the region to attend such an institution, she asked her mother about the story of how she and Jack had met. Katherine smiled at the memory, now softened by the passage of time. "I was at my lowest point," she recalled. "You were hungry, crying for milk I didn't have, and then he appeared like something from a dream and made a promise. 'You'll eat before dawn,'" Eliza quoted, familiar with the story. "And you did." "Yes," Katherine agreed, her eyes finding Jack across the yard, still strong and vital despite the silver now predominant in his hair. "We did, and we've never gone hungry since, not for food, not for love, not for family." "That's why you always say promises matter," Eliza realized. "They do," Katherine confirmed. "The right promise made by the right person can change everything." And as she watched her daughter prepare to embark on her own journey, Katherine knew the truth of those words in the deepest part of her heart. One promise, kept in the darkest hour, had been the foundation for a lifetime of love, a family born from desperation and hope, and a future brighter than she could ever have imagined on that terrible night beneath the Texas stars.